Om Jnanatirmirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. This evening I will speak on religion for the 21st century. Religion means dharmang tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam, that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So actual religion has nothing to do with any particular time, place or circumstance within this material world. The truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's dominance over everything, and that He is Krishna, and of the Jiva's subordination to Him, transcends all time, places and circumstances. He is important, we are not important. Now we are here in this city which is important. Belfast is important in Northern Ireland and has no importance anywhere else. Nowhere else does anyone think it's, well, maybe in London. Politically, among some people it's considered important. I guess that's an advantage of being born in Ireland. You don't have the innate puffed upness or pride of being born in England and thinking that we're a very important country, or being born in America and thinking we're very important. So, at least people in Ireland don't have that false egoism of thinking that we're very important. Actually, Srila Prabhupada said once that the British are the most puffed up people in the world. So, you were right if you thought that previously. Anyway, we are unimportant. Whether or not we think we are important, we are unimportant. Krishna is important. Everyone in the material world takes themselves far more seriously than they should do. Krishna is important. Krishna comes to this world to inform at least the pious people, the people who are not too much contaminated, and not so overly contaminated by thinking themselves as important that they really are convinced that they are God. The people who are at least somewhat pious, Krishna comes to speak Bhagavad Gita and tell them that, hey, I'm the important one, not you. I'm actually important. So Krishna comes and gives the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, which is timeless. It'll never go out of date, because it concerns eternal principles. It's always fresh. It's always meaningful. And Krishna sends his representatives to present this knowledge in the world to various people in various times and places and circumstances. And they may not, all of them, present the message of Bhagavad Gita fully. Srila Prabhupada accepted Jesus and Muhammad as representatives of Krishna, but they didn't present Bhagavad Gita as it is. They presented as much as the people could understand in that particular time and place and circumstance. And even within India, one of the avatars is Buddha, who presented an understanding which incorporates some of the Vedic principles and much of the Vedic, pretty much all of the Vedic culture, much of the Vedic principles, but the Vedic principles without the actual essential point of Krishna. So they got a lot of it right, actually. This world is full of suffering, birth, death, old age, and disease is suffering. It's the same as in Bhagavad Gita. But Lord Buddha didn't speak of the soul and didn't speak of God, and then was later interpreted to be atheistic. So even within India, there are various preachers who give various messages to people in various times, places, and circumstances according to their ability to appreciate that. And it may be that they're not given the whole message. Here, at the beginning of the 21st century, which is, just in case anyone didn't notice, is a time of chaos in the world and imminent disaster from so many different sources, economic, ecological, social, political, military, and it's just, which one's going to collapse first, and then the whole world is poised on the brink of disaster. And people are stupid, what the Bhagavatam states, short-lived, stupid, very stupid, unlucky, bad-natured, this prayanal payasho sabya kalavasmin yuge janaha manda sumanda matayo manda bhagahi upadrutaha, and their minds are always disturbed. So then don't seem to be very good candidates for understanding the highest truth. But it is at this time, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is being presented in the world via the medium of Bhagavad Gita as it is, or rather the Bhagavad Gita itself is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That is quite a paradox, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to present this. Well, we can add to that the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and the highest truth. I mean, even as I just stated, even some of the points that Buddha taught were the truth, but it wasn't the whole truth, and wasn't the highest truth. And even what Krishna presents is introductory in Bhagavad Gita, and the highest truth is so secret that it's hardly ever presented in human society, that the highest truth of Krishna's intimate dealings with his devotees in Vrindavan. So that's not even available to many great rishis and highly self-controlled people, highly advanced transcendentalists and devotees. They also may not appreciate this, but somehow means by the causeless mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is being preached in the modern age through the medium of Srila Prabhupada. Of course, Srila Prabhupada mostly spoke on Bhagavad Gita as it is, and not very much on Krishna's intimate pastimes in Vrindavan, and there's a reason for that, which I discussed to some extent last night. But the people of the world seem very unlikely candidates for that, but that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's causeless mercy, that he wanted to give it to demonstrate how great is the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That can be best demonstrated when the least likely candidates are given the highest gift. So that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's gift. And that is supposed to be distributed by the followers of Srila Prabhupada in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. At the present time, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, in the view of most of the people of the world, it's not even on the view, it's not even on the radar, it's just not there, it's not, people don't even think about it because they don't know about it, or they might vaguely think about it as much as they think about the Royal Society for helping spastics or whatever. I mean, for except for people who are members, it's not a major movement in, they don't say spastics nowadays, anyway, whatever they call them. So, as interesting as, what the British National Croquet Association or something. Croquet, you know what that is? It's a, you have balls and you hit them into holes. It's like a something vaguely similar to golf. It somehow didn't capture the attention of, didn't get promoted as much as golf. Similar idea. So it's not very popular game, but some people are into it, and among themselves they take themselves very seriously, no doubt. So the ISKCON could be compared to that it's just, we have a message, well, people are not very interested in it, but it's the job of devotees to make them interested for their own benefit. Now, if you look at the world today, what are we up against? Because preaching means not just going out and saying, well, surrender to Krishna, but it means also disabusing people of their misconceptions. People are unlikely to accept the message of Bhagavad Gita as it is, as long as they are immersed in the ocean of various misconceptions. Just like, as I mentioned, was that this morning I mentioned, how Srila Prabhupada in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, he states that Krishna spoke this some 120 million years ago to the sun god, and he doesn't, he just expects everyone who's reading it to accept it. It's like saying that you have a Beatles t-shirt, Abbey Road, so the Beatles made the Abbey Road record in 1968, something like that. So it's a matter-of-fact kind of statement, which people, at least in this part of the world, if you say it in India, hardly anyone's heard of the Beatles. But if you say it in Britain today, still people know of the Beatles. And if you say that, it's not a statement that people are likely to collapse in shock on hearing or protest about or dismiss it as being fantastic. It's a matter-of-fact statement that the Beatles made the Abbey Road record in, if you get the date right, it's a matter of, I don't know, about 1968, I guess it was. No, they're already, anyways, 1960 something or other. Give the right date and it'll be a matter-of-fact statement. So Prabhupada states in the same way, Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god 120 million years ago. So the fact that anyone was speaking anything 120 million years ago, let alone speaking to a sun god, what's a sun god? What is that? It sounds like something from some primitive mythology. So on both of these statements in Bhagavad Gita introduction are likely to be dismissed out of hand by most people in the world today. But Srila Prabhupada states it matter-of-factly. So for people to accept such statements, and that's just, there's so many statements in this Bhagavad Gita as it is, which for people to accept them, they have to de-accept or reject pretty much all that they have considered to be truth or reality since they were born, or since they've started to get indoctrinated with all these different ideas. And throughout Bhagavad Gita, the different element, what are the elements? Hydrogen, helium, no, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the gross elements. Right in one of in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada writes that women are less intelligent. It's very, very early, so and you just expect to accept it. Although in the modern age, wait a minute, I didn't say it. Don't throw the tomatoes yet. In the modern age, that's considered wrong. Someone's ethically, seriously wrong to make such statements, but Prabhupada states it. So, if we are to preach the message of Bhagavad Gita as it is, first of all, we'll have to be convinced ourselves, and we'll have to be cognizant of the various misconceptions that that people are attached to, and their various world views. Now, here in the Western world, we're very concerned with the dominant world view or world views, and in the Western world we tend to think that this is reality as it is, and the world views of the West are what everyone embraces, but actually in much of the world other perspectives than the Western are predominant. Like in the Muslim world, people tend to think in a very different way, for instance, than they do in the modern West. And I haven't been to China, but probably they think differently there also. But the Western world, the modern Western outlook is very influential, and it's trying to make it universal culture of blue jeans and McDonald's and the benefits of modern education and all this kind of thing. So it is the main culture in the world, and especially for those who are living bang slap in the middle of it, to address if we are to establish the teachings of Bhagavad Gita as it is. So, what are we up against? Well, what is Western culture? It's, of course, it's very difficult to completely define a culture, especially one that has become so multicultural. But undoubtedly the major force in Western culture over the last 2,000 years or so has been Christianity, and it's still a major force, and more so here in Ireland than on the other side of the Irish Sea. But it's also very influential. Even people who don't consider themselves Christians, and there are plenty of them on the other side of the sea, not so many on this side. Well, there are significantly more on this side also than there were a generation ago. But they don't realize, probably most of them don't realize how much they're influenced by ideas that have come from Christianity. By Christianity here, I don't mean necessarily the teachings of Christ, but Christianity. For instance, science, in rejecting the church's dogma of the church's dogmatic view of the universe. As who is that? Was it Galileo? The bishop refused to look through his telescope. Hey, look through the telescope, you can see. I'm not going to look through your telescope. He didn't want to see. I'm not looking through your telescope, but you're going to be looking out from a stake and be burned at it if you don't shut up. So he came up against some pretty powerful arguments there for not propagating what he'd discovered. The argument is, well, either shut up or we'll shut you up. So, but even in rejecting that Christianity could provide actual knowledge of the universe, they adopted unthinkingly the model of linear time that came from Christianity. that the universe came into being at a point in time, and it will end at a point in time. The Vedic understanding of cyclical time is repeated creation and destruction of the multi-universes, not one universe. Why only one universe? Of course, universe, the term means everything, one, but Srila Prabhupada's use of the term universe is somewhat different, because the Vedic understanding is that there are many Brahmandas, many egg-like universes. You could say many universes, in as much as each one is a complete unit in itself. So they're created and destroyed, created and destroyed, created and destroyed, created and destroyed. So it's cyclic. There are cycles, but even in rejecting Christian dogma, the scientists adopted facets of it, so people are, even without knowing that, people who reject Christianity, they're still, because that's been so influential in the culture, it's still a very influential vector in the Western world. So the history of Christianity, and then the Enlightenment and the rejection, the age of reason over dogmatic religious authority, and this science went from strength to strength, and then the influence of Darwin in promoting atheism, and the idea that science, we can work it all out, we don't need any God to explain anything, and by science we can control nature with it. And people used to believe in God because they were stupid and they didn't have knowledge as we have today, and so science developed in the Western world in defiance of religious authority. In Vedic cultures, highly developed science was complementary to theism, but in the Western world, it necessarily grew up in defiance of theism, so that among the scientific orthodoxy, even today, to be a scientist, to be a real scientist, is considered that it's just a given that you have to be an atheist. That belief in God, it just doesn't go, it's unscientific. It's unscientific to believe in God. And the scientific method is considered the proper method for studying everything, for studying social sciences, the human mind, economics. Everything is supposed to be studied by the scientific method of neutral, empiric, supposedly neutral, supposedly empiric observation. Even the social sciences, by taking statistics, they're supposed to be able to ascertain various facts about human society. So science has, to a large extent, eclipsed Christianity as the dominant intellectual force or thought-forming force in the Western world. I mean, even people, they believe in God, but when they go to school, they're taught in a manner that promotes the scientific method, with belief in the science is also intimately linked with humanism, belief in the supremacy of the human intellect and the ability of the human intellect to to understand, whereas simply some mumbo jumbo scriptures that's considered, people can believe in it if they like, but it's not really very intellectual or it's not as academically sound as the humanistic scientific method. So this has become very dominant in human society, and in America, which is still, even though it appears to be a sinking ship, but it's still, the party is going on in full force. The band's still playing, even like on the Titanic. The ship is sinking, but the band's still playing in full force. So, like that. Well, for some people, there are plenty of beggars on the streets in the cities of America, and the whole country's in a terrible mess. But in the meantime, Obama's fiddling, is playing his fiddle. Well, so even if, as it seems likely that America in the years to come will, well, it's already happening, that will not be as dominant and influential militarily, economically, culturally, politically, as it has been in the past, still it's likely to be very influential for many years to come. Many years according to our limited vision. So in America there's a great cultural divide between fundamentalist, evangelistic Christians on one side, who promote that, well, we just take the Bible as it is. Like Prabhupada promotes Bhagavad Gita as it is. We just believe the Bible. For instance, that there was Noah's Ark 6,000 years ago. The world was created, just a few thousand years ago, and that Jesus is coming, and you better believe in him, otherwise you'll burn in hell. He was scheduled on May the 21st, but somehow or other he missed the bus or something. Didn't quite make it. You know that? May the 21st, Judgment Day? Heard about that? Yeah! You didn't surrender and bathe yourself in the blood of Jesus and didn't learn about that? Oh, because the internet was down in Israel. It was splattered all over the internet, and people were giving away all their cows and sheep in different countries because they believe Jesus is coming. So, I mean, it practically is, since I was able to walk and talk, Jesus has been coming. It's always maximum 3 years away, but somehow or other, due to the internet, this one become widely publicized. So you have on the one hand these highly dogmatic Christians on one side, and you have everyone else on the other side. And everyone else is, there are a mishmash of various liberal groups who believe in multiculturalism, and liberal in the sense that they believe that, well, everyone, humanistic values, that everyone should be allowed to do whatever they like, as much freedom as possible without being tied to various dogma. If you want to believe in whatever you want to believe, you can, as long as it doesn't harm anyone else. You can do whatever you like as long as it doesn't harm anyone else, which includes homosexuality doesn't harm anyone. So if they're consensual partners, so what's the harm? And if you're unhappy in your marriage, you can just dissolve it, because what's the problem? And so on. It just, as long as it doesn't harm anyone. Oh, you're taking rest very early, huh? So there are atheists who there were atheistic celebrations all over America on May the 22nd. And then you get and then there's another whole strand in America, which is, of course, not, when I say America, of course, not only in America, but this is particularly in America, and it is the most influential country in the world via Hollywood and various rock groups and Harvard University. They bring students come from all over the world to study, not only in Harvard, in American universities, and McDonald's and all this kind of thing, cartoons. They all have their influence. So another strand is there of many younger people who are, like, on one hand, they just don't want to have anything to do with Christianity. It's like they've got an allergy because they find it so distasteful. This Bible thumping and we burn in hell kind of preaching. On the other hand, they're also not great votaries of the materialistic society. Get ahead, enjoy yourself. What they call it, being spiritual without being religious. That they're being spiritual without religious means do-it-yourself kind of religion. It's a continuation from the hippie idea of the 60s that you can read different books of spirituality and make your own idea. Definitely don't want any institutionalized religion, no religious institution. Just you can be you don't need, as this Krishnamurti's ideas that you shouldn't take anyone as a guru, don't take anyone's instruction, don't read any books, as he wrote in his books. That's also promoted, incidentally, by Stephen Covey, who was quite popular some time ago. I guess he's still somewhat popular. He was wildly popular at one point, but like everything else, it wears off. So I happened to open one of his books once, which I saw in a temple president's office, see what everyone's raving about. And I opened it, and it was a list of the qualities of his idea of what the qualities of a great person is, or the kind of person and that he thinks that they should be like. So one of the qualities was he doesn't take anyone as his guru. He makes his own ideas. So he's giving you the book to give you the idea that you shouldn't take ideas from anyone else. So this idea is very influential. That you don't take any guide. You yourself are the arbiter of reality. One of my disciples who distributes books in America, he goes to concerts and university campuses, mostly among young people all over America, and he often meets people who he's distributed books to. So he told me that often he meets people, he's given them Bhagavad Gita, and then he asks them if they've read it, and sometimes they say no, but quite often they say yes, but I just read the translations of the verses and not the commentary, because I don't want anyone to explain it to me. I'll make my own understanding. Just incredibly stupid that, there's just some puffed up kid who, they think they have a better understanding than Prabhupada, who comes from a whole tradition completely dedicated to spiritual understanding, a thousands of years old tradition, and they think, I'll make my own understanding. I don't need anyone to explain it for me. So this do-it-yourself spiritualism, but be spiritual but not religious. This is another strand and within modern culture, the vague spirituality which is defined by just feeling spiritual without any commitment. And although they purport to be not very materialistic, they're not the kind of people who are spiritual but not religious. They're not the kind of people who are going to put on a suit and try and get ahead in some big company and become share brokers and all this. But they're quite good at enjoying the material world also in their own. It's not that they've given up enjoying the material world, because in their understanding everything's God. So, why not enjoy God? There's no harm if there's this feeling that I am God, I am one with everything. So these are the these are the major thought patterns or worldviews in modern society. Although it's very generally speaking. Here in Northern Ireland, I suppose that that hardcore Protestantism, evangelism, is also quite strong. Outside of America, it's probably the Northern Ireland is the and they're in Africa and India because they're exporting it like anything to all. So Christianity is spreading like anything in India and Africa to Kampuchea, all kinds of this kind of really hardcore, fanatical, hate everything else kind of religion, which is so I guess that's still pretty strong here among the Protestants, who feel that to be a good Protestant, the main thing is not to love Jesus, but to hate Catholics. That's the main symptom, right, of a good Protestant. And to hate everyone else, I guess, because anyway they're all going to burn in hell. So you can give God a hand by killing them off, and what does it matter if you kill them, and because anyway they're going to burn in hell forever. So we'll assist God, help him along the way. So the Krishna consciousness movement is meant for giving not actual knowledge of reality, which above all these different strands of fanaticism, sentimentalism, vagueness, ignorance, which typify modern life. This fanatical kind of religion in which God is perceived as a person or a non-person or an entity who just, if you don't do what he says, he'll burn you in hell forever, like something like a spoiled child who got in charge of everything. So with some nasty, very severe personality defect, that if you don't do what I say, we'll just burn you forever, with no hope of any redemption. I mean, a really nasty person. And you have to believe in him without any reason or logic, and you have to get it just, or you have to be in just the right church, because they all claim exclusivity. Burn in hell forever! Turn off your damn cell phone! Whoops, I got a major personality defect there. So we have, it's not only stupid and unappealing to anyone of any what we might call reasonable and intelligent outlook. It's just horrible. And on the other hand, we have this scientific orthodoxy, which He's saying, no, there's no... This Richard Dawkins, it's extremely unlikely that there's any God. And, he says, but actually their time is over also. The scientific atheist time is up, because by scientific investigation, it's become quite clear to an increasing number of actual real scientists that life cannot arise from matter, by chance interaction of matter. And it just, and the universe in its complexity cannot come about from matter, and therefore we have this whole intelligent design thing. And maybe one of course, apart from their demoniac mentality, one reason why many people are rejecting this intelligent design, even though it's actually scientific, is that if they think that, if they accept that they have to accept fundamentalist Christianity. I mean, it's you have to go back to this like Middle Ages, fanatical stupidity in the name of religion. It's like the one major leap back for mankind. And so you have on one hand this fanatical, quasi-religious or quasi-theistic dogma, and which is not, doesn't at all appeal to the intelligence. And then we have scientism on the other hand, which superficially appeals to the intelligence, but has got things seriously wrong. They don't accept that there's any God. And then you have people who don't want to have anything to do either with religion or with the atheistic or the scientific orthodoxy, and then they have their do-it-yourself, impersonal, New Age, so-called spirituality. So, actually it's a very good time for preaching Krishna consciousness, because people are so confused. And people who are a little bit thoughtful, there aren't many of them, but they do exist, when they get Prabhupada's books, then immediately they can understand that, as is stated in the Bhagavatam itself, Tadvag Visarago, this is another kind of creation. It's something completely different from the various dogmas and foolishnesses posing as correctness within the world. It's the first, as I've many times said, and it's a fact. The first verse of Bhagavatam gives more knowledge of actual reality than all the libraries in the world put together. All the speculations of various philosophers, all the so-called religions, just the first verse of Bhagavatam. Janmadya saryaton vyaditaratas chartesh avignaswarat tene brahma hridaya adi kaviye muhyanti yat suryaha Tijo vari mridang yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mersha dhamna swena sadani rasta kuhakang satyang parang dhimahi. This is actual theism, knowledge of God. Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, who was studying comparative religions or something like that in a PhD course at Temple University in Philadelphia, in USA, he said that when he read the first book he read of Prabhupada's, the Ishopanishad, he understood immediately this is first-class theology. The Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. There's no such understanding in the Abrahamic religions or the scientific emptiness, so-called. With no, scientism means that we are and just blobs of matter that by chance happen to be around, and there's no real significance in our lives. Dawkins addressed that in his most famous book, The God Delusion. He said that the question of, well, if without religion there's no meaning to life, and he said, well, the meaning is, my meaning is, he said, someone asked me about that, and I said, well, I'm just going to go and have a good meal. And we did, we had a good meal. In other words, the meaning is, we're here now, enjoy yourself, that's all there is. Kimanyat kama haitukam. What is there to do but fulfill our desire, to enjoy ourselves? So it's not very inspiring. So, actual knowledge is there in Srila Prabhupada's books. And Srila Prabhupada, his presentation of religion was neither too worldly or too otherworldly. I'll explain that, what I mean by that. That many religions are actually very worldly. That the Protestant ethic is work hard and God will reward you with plenty of money. And poverty is a sign of impiety. As if you're poor, that means God doesn't like you. Although it's not what Jesus said. Blessed are the poor, for, what is it? Theirs is the kingdom of God. Something like that. He definitely said, blessed are the poor. But in the Protestant ethic, blessed are the rich. So a worldly idea of religion, or helping the poor, that's another interpretation, which is probably closer to Jesus' teachings. Helping the poor, or the idea that we go to heaven and it's like this world, as C.S. Lewis. Yeah, please, comments and questions later, please. C.S. Lewis, he wrote this series of books, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the Narnia series, and just when you get to the end, you understand it's supposed to be a theological treatise. And what happens is they find that they've all been transported to the kingdom of God. And what's the kingdom of God like? Well, it's just like England. Of course. So this worldly idea of religion, do good works, or various strands of then on the other hand, there are otherworldly religions which just like reject the world altogether. People reject the world. They go away from the world to do austerities and maybe meditation or pray. They lock themselves away in monasteries. So they consider the world as completely, they don't have any relationship with it. They consider it completely useless. And all they're thinking about is God and their ultimate beatitude, which they aim for. So there are a few who are like that, very otherworldly, and some who are very worldly. But Srila Prabhupada, following Krishna's example, in teaching Bhagavad Gita, was both worldly, not too otherworldly, and not too worldly, in the sense that ultimately religion means to know God and to get out of this world. But we have to see how to live in this world also in a manner that is conducive for becoming detached from it. And understanding that not everyone is fit for total detachment from this world. And maybe that's not the best thing for anyone anyway, because even if one is mentally totally detached or emotionally totally detached from this world, he should work within this world for the benefit of others and not just leave it altogether. So we find in Bhagavad Gita that Lord Krishna, while telling Arjuna not to be attached to this world, he talks, Anasaktan abhishvangas putra dara grihadishu. He speaks of those who are not attached. One of the symptoms of knowledge is one who is not attached to children, home, children, wife, home, and the rest. Putra dara grihadishu. Anasakta anabhishvanga. Putra dara grihadishu. Nityang cha samachittatvam. I want to be always situated in the same consciousness, not fluctuating according to external stimuli. He's always situated in the meditation on the self. So that's otherworldliness, but on the other hand, Krishna tells Arjuna to fight. And that was Arjuna's dilemma. He thought there's either worldliness or otherworldliness, and he couldn't understand that Krishna was telling him to fight and at the same time be meditating on the Supreme, namely Krishna. So that was Arjuna's dilemma, which he finally got, and he finally understood that, and then he agreed to fight, but in a different consciousness, to fight on Krishna's order. So Krishna, he speaks in Bhagavad Gita of the 4 varnas, which means also the 4 ashrams. In other words, Krishna, he himself acted as if in many ways, as if he was a human being within this world. And he states that in Bhagavad Gita also, that if I didn't work in this world, then others would also take that wrong example. So Krishna shows how to live in this world, interact with this world, and at the same time develop the consciousness that we don't belong to this world. And Prabhupada wanted to teach that. He wasn't so detached from the world that while he was pointing toward the spiritual world, he also had very practical plans, setting up communities in which devotees could live according to their individual physical propensities and cultivate Krishna consciousness according to Varnashram. Srila Prabhupada had very practical plans. He was for doing this. He said that 50% of my work is not done, and if you consider what he did do, it was monumental. So it's obviously it's a major challenge to do that. So Srila Prabhupada, not only was he presenting the actual knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, which should supersede this blind theism, blind atheism, blind so-called spiritualism. Not only is he giving the knowledge, but he's giving a very practical process. The spiritual process is very practical by chanting the holy names of Krishna. But there's also a whole backup of how to live in this world so that we can apply ourselves to the process of Krishna consciousness, and so that the material life becomes our spiritual life. Work for Krishna. And a very practical process like that. Many so-called religionists, they don't really have much of a process. They certainly don't have a structured scientific process as we do in Krishna consciousness. Rules and regulations to follow that help one to become spiritually advanced. There are people who say, well, I'm religious but not spiritual. They don't have any rules, except ones they may just accept themselves, like they may do so-called meditation for every morning, or they may be vegetarian, but they don't have a structured process by which they can become spiritually advanced, which they need. This idea, I'll just by myself, do-it-yourself spiritualism, it doesn't work, because people who are not in knowledge of the goal can never attain it simply by their own imaginative process. So Srila Prabhupada gave a practical, spiritual process based on knowledge, and he gave a blueprint for living in this world in a very practical way, that people can be potters or cooks or doctors or teachers or housewives or farmers or pharmacists. There's so many different things people can do within Krishna consciousness, within a Krishna conscious society. So Srila Prabhupada was certainly very convinced that the Krishna conscious movement has the answers and is the answer to the confusion of modern society. So when we say religion for the 21st century, that which is religion for the 21st century it's the same principle in all times, places and circumstances. But at the present time, with the world so much confused, we have a very good platform to present this. People who are neither enamored by fundamental, hardcore, hardline, dogmatic religious systems, nor by the scientific, humanistic establishment, and also not attracted to this do-it-yourself so-called spirituality. In other words, people who are a little bit open-minded and sincere, they should appreciate this. And if we can establish communities with Krishna in the center, people living, cooperating with Krishna in the center, then surely there's great scope. As the world becomes more and more confused, devotees shouldn't be confused. Devotees should be very clear in understanding this is the goal of life, this is how to live. But without that dogmatism, but devotees should be able to explain that why we're living like this, why we accept Bhagavad Gita as it is. Srila Prabhupada himself was personally explaining all the time, but he wanted to show this practically. So there is great scope, despite the long slough that our society has entered into in the Western world. There's scope. I mean, at any time it can burst forth, because this is the solution to all the problems of the world. All the problems of the world, they stem from forgetfulness of Krishna. And if people know Krishna, then they become joyful, peaceful at heart, pure in activity. And people can see that when our devotees go chanting and dancing in the cities, performing festivals. People can see. Even when they're not doing that, people can see it. There's Ram Nrsimha Prabhu in England. Maybe, I don't know if you know him. He's from the London area. So a few years ago, he sells paintings, real paintings. I mean, painted by real artists in England. He's not doing that cheating Korean paintings business, but he sells real paintings. And so he sells a few paintings here and there, and the rest of the time engages in Krishna conscious activities. Anyway, I'm not speaking about Ram Nrsimha, I'm just giving an example. So he was selling some paintings in someone's house in Chorleywood, have you ever heard of that, which is near London. And the person who is selling paintings to asked him, he said, well, how come you seem to be so peaceful in yourself, and what's your secret? He said, well, I'm a Hare Krishna. And So I happen to know that because the woman who asked him is a second cousin of mine, and she said, "Oh yeah, well, one of my cousins, he went off to India years ago, and he's in that also." And he kind of guessed it must be me. Ram Nrsimha guessed. So even devotees, if devotees are actually practicing, then they do develop genuine spiritual qualities, which people will notice, and they like to be like that. If we're actually putting Krishna in the center of our lives and cultivating anyabhilashita shunyam jnanakamadhyanavritamanukuvena krishna anushilanam bhakti ruttama, selfless devotional service, simply acting for the pleasure of Krishna, then certainly a devotee, he gains inner peacefulness, inner strength, joyfulness, by the grace of Krishna. That's the natural quality, and people will see that and want to be like that. Why not? So there's great hope. It's not all over. It's however bad the situation. As I said to them, was that this morning? I said to Gopalgan, the devotee, said, even if 1,000 gurus blooped and 10 million children in our society were abused, which but still Krishna consciousness is ultimate reality, and that won't ever change, and no one can take that away from us, and it's up to every individual to take to Krishna consciousness and not to be discouraged by however bad things may be. They're all temporary. They're not of the nature of reality. Then the reality is that we're all eternal servants of Krishna, and that some people may have taken to Krishna consciousness and not followed the process properly doesn't mean that Krishna consciousness doesn't work. It does work. Krishna is still God. However much anyone might misrepresent him or not come up to the standard, but we're all eternal part and parcel of Krishna. And if we apply ourselves to the process, then we get the result. And if we don't, well, people sometimes the devotees say, well, you see, all these people fell down, but that just proves that Krishna, that is in itself a proof of the process of Krishna consciousness, because if you don't apply yourself properly, that's what happens. So, and those who do apply themselves properly, they go on, forward. They get the mercy of Krishna, just like we see. So, some old-timers who are going on, right here in this room, the unsung heroes and heroines, we have to say he, she, right? He or she, he and she. Heroes and well, it's true, heroes and heroines, who they're going on with their Krishna consciousness. Krishna's giving them mercy. So let's make it big. Why not? Why not? Their potential is there. It's up to us to take it to the streets and the homes and the colleges and the farms, and in many ways there's very good scope here in Ireland. It's so much more pious than England. I mean, even I've been pretty harsh, I guess, in my talking about Christianity this evening, but that faith in God, even without proper knowledge, is so much better than just skepticism and atheism. I mean, always, even when we didn't have centres in Ireland, our devotees used to come from England for distributing books, because they send the best distributors here, because people are so much more receptive. Even previously, and again now, people in Ireland, they didn't have much money, but compared to in England, but still they'd like to give. Even if it's like, you speak to, of course this is generalization, but it was true enough that always the most efficient book distributors were sent to Ireland. That you might find someone in England with £10 in their wallet. In those days, that was a good sum of money. I'm talking about the 1970s here. And but it'd be difficult to get 10 pence out of them. Whereas in Ireland, if someone had 50p in their purse, they might just give it all to you, you know, because they had that tendency. Here in Northern Ireland, I remember one evening we parked in a field of Sankirtan van, and some young boys came up and they asked what were we doing, and said, well, we're travelling monks, and then after half an hour they came back with a bunch of sandwiches which their parents had said we couldn't eat them because of what was in them, but that tendency, you know, that so many things we used to, you know, beg food all the time, which you couldn't do in England. I mean, one thing was they had small shops, whereas already in England by that time it was all Tesco and Spar and all that kind of thing. So definitely people here are very pious, and there's very good scope. Maybe about 10 or 12 years ago I was on a bus going from Belfast out toward Enniskillen, and I noticed there's a young boy on the other side reading some Hermann Hesse book or something like that, so I thought I'd start to preach to him a bit. And he told me that among the young intellectual people in Ireland, it's all Eastern religion, and they're not. The very strong tendency is toward that. So definitely, there's very good scope here. So Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. It's up to you. I'm just a talker. I go from place to place to talk, but I'm leaving Ireland tomorrow. Supposed to. Man proposes, God disposes. Inshallah, as they say. Very good saying. You know what that means? Inshallah. If you say in Islam, if you say, tomorrow I will do this or that, you have to say, Inshallah, if God wills. So that's very good, isn't it? Masha Allah, in the name of God. So they have it's not all. This image is promoted in the Western world of all Muslims being like fanatic terrorists, but it's not true at all. Most people are. I mean, I'm not saying they're all great saints, but in general in Islam there is, you know, deep belief in God, and in my experience, which isn't that extensive, but there are many Muslims who, although completely committed to the religious system which they're raised in, they appreciate people who are similarly committed to God. So let's give them better knowledge of who that person is they pray to 5 times a day. Allah. Yeah. Give them better knowledge of that. Alright, Hare Krishna. Any questions, comments? You can throw your tomatoes now. But wait till I go outside the temple room. Shouldn't make a mess in the temple room. Verbal tomatoes. Bombs. That's more dangerous. You know, in the past people might have thrown tomatoes. Now they're more likely to throw bombs. Yes, you wanted to say something.
Christians also say that you have to be born again.
Christians say you have to be born again
in order to get into the kingdom of God.
Yeah, but their idea of being born again is what they call baptism, right? You have to be bathed in the blood of Jesus. That's what they call it, whatever that is. It sounds horrible, whatever it is, but their idea isn't what we call punarapi jananam, getting born again and again. It's a different understanding altogether.
Then what Christ says.
What he says and what Christ says and what Christians live by, there's a lot of difference.
He says, in my Father's house there are many mansions, and I shall go prepare a place for you. And then he says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are very few.
Yeah.
And then we can relate to the 7th chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, and Lord Shri Krishna says, deluded by the 3 modes of material nature, the whole world does not know me. So I think there's a link here. What Lord
Yeah,
is saying.
yeah. I'm not saying that what Christ, as I said, he's accepted by Srila Prabhupada, or actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur accepted him as a Shaktya Vaishyavatar. So it's not that what Christ taught was bad, but the reinterpretation of him in many cases is quite different from the spirit that he wanted to inculcate.
Srila Prabhupada told many Christians that if you can love the Son, why not the Father, which is Krishna?
Yeah, that's true. Something like that. Anything else?
There's one more point.
There are many more points. Maybe some evening you could give a lecture here.
No, actually, since you were talking about Krishnamurti, I happened to go to a school in India, in Bangalore, and he used to come in the evening and sometime in the morning assembly, and he used to tell us, never about God, but he said, if you look at a flower or a tree and you lose yourself into that, and that is God. So he was not good. He was not able to give us a proper answer who God is. And then he said, one needs inward flowering. And he said, always say...
Okay, I mean, what's the point of listening to all the nonsense he's talking?
I mean. So when I actually came to read Prabhupada's books, then I realized,
Prabhupada gave clear, factual information, yeah. We don't need to listen to all the nonsense of all these nonsense people to understand that what Prabhupada is giving is real. It's better not to immerse ourselves too much in all that stuff.
But people are being misled.
They are. That's true.
This is why I was misled.
So please read Prabhupada's books. Yeah.
How we should think about Christian saints before they were...
How should we think of Christian saints?
Seems like they got proper ideas to some extent.
Proper ideas to some extent. Some of them, yeah.
They became vegetarians.
Some of them vegetarians, yeah.
And many other people.
But to be a vegetarian isn't in and of itself the greatest qualification. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada said about Saint Francis when he was told when Srila Prabhupada was lecturing in a Franciscan seminary in Australia, I can't remember which city, Melbourne, I think. Anyway. He was asked, well, what do you think of Saint Francis? And Prabhupada said, well, what did he teach? And they told him, the seminarians told him that, well, he saw the animals and the trees as, I'm paraphrasing here, as brothers and sisters, and Prabhupada said that is first-class God consciousness. In Bhagavatam, there's that verse, Sarva Bhuteshu Ya Pashyad Bhagavad Bhavam Atmanaha Bhuteshu Bhagavat Atman Eva Bhagavatotama Esha Bhagavatotama. The first, or the topmost devotee sees all living beings as part and parcel of Krishna. So Prabhupada said that's first-class God consciousness. Now, I don't know if... well, you can see the film of that, and Prabhupada, that was his spontaneous appreciation. Possibly, if that had been discussed in more detail with Prabhupada among his own followers, he would say that they say that God is great, but they don't know how He is great. They don't have clear knowledge of God. But he appreciated. But then if we want to have real knowledge of God, we have to come to the Gita and Bhagavatam. It's just not there in Christianity. People don't know anything about it. And a major mistake in Christianity, there is mistaking Jesus for being God Himself. That's a major mistake. And there's so many wrong ideas that Jesus is God and then they killed Him. How can you kill God? And the whole crux of Christianity is that Jesus died for our sins, and you have to believe that, and then you get saved. But Jesus Himself never said any such thing. This was invented later. So, I mean, there are serious problems in there, and you can see from the history, as Prabhupada said, it's a history of killing. Just history of killing. So saints, I mean, among the saints, there's this saint, who's that one in Goa? Saint Francis Xavier. He made so many converts by, his method was to convert or die. So he killed so many people. And even there were Christians there were what are still called in Kerala the Syrian Christians, who were there before Saint Francis came there, and they thought it was pretty cool. Some guy came from Europe, a Christian. They came to see him, but they weren't. Their Christianity had evolved differently over the centuries from Christianity of the Roman Catholic Church. And so he subjected them to the Inquisition and started torturing them and everything. They came to say, "Oh, nice Christian came," but they weren't exactly Christians in the same way. So he just, gave them the Inquisition, and that's one of the, there's so saints. You have to see each one individually, but a lot of them are not so saintly. They make this. They want to make this John Paul the second, a saint. He's a big meat eater. No compunction about veal was his favorite food, which is it's horrible. So it can't be. You're a greater saint by far than John Paul II. Mother Teresa, another hoax. Promoted as being such a saintly person. Even the most neophyte devotee in our movement is far more saint. They're not a meat eater, every day eating meat. Where's the saintliness? They can't understand this. It's horrible. So don't be enamored by this. I mean, okay, Christianity contributed something, but it's a mixed bag of. But really, Krishna consciousness, the knowledge and the process, it's on such a superior level that there's no need to get sidetracked by Christianity or Islam or general hodgepodge Hinduism or vegetarianism or crop circles or UFOs or New Age. There's no need to get sidetracked by anything. Reiki, what else is there? Laughter therapy, and there's rock music, and there's so many things which are advertised as things we can or should get into in Krishna consciousness. But the whole process which Prabhupada gave, which he gave in Parampara, which is going on since time immemorial, it's great. It works. No need to add, subtract, reinterpret. Just stick to the same old thing. Old is good.
Old is gold.
It's better than gold. In the modern world, there's the idea you always have to do something new and different. But in Vedic culture, the strength is in following the old. Instead of thinking, I'm bringing up something new, I'm showing myself better than everyone else that ever came, is to think that I'm a humble servant of the great personalities of the past. To accept that they have knowledge that we can follow to our benefit. Everything's already there. You don't have to change anything. Of course, Krishna consciousness may be presented in different ways according to the various circumstances, but the essence is the same always. And it's better to present it as much as possible in the traditional format given by the acharyas. Otherwise, there's the danger of speculation and making serious changes. And also the traditional format and the traditional culture is that which fosters Krishna consciousness. There is a difference between wearing what we can call devotional clothes and wearing what we can call karmic clothes. There's a difference. It makes a difference in one's consciousness. There's a difference between having a shaved head and not having a shaved head. It may not be the major factor, but then if you strip Krishna consciousness of all these factors, then it's definitely going to make a difference in our whole consciousness and outlook. The culture supports the understanding and the cultivation of Krishna consciousness.